Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about tips, tricks, and approaches to using the tools on Packback to get the most value for your class. And we're very lucky to be joined today by two incredible instructors, Paul Hillman, who is a professor of management at Grand Valley State University, and Jeffery Masters, who is an assistant professor of biology at University of Louisville. I am very excited to also be able to share that we're joined today by our manager of customer success, Kelsey Behringer. If you personally are working with an EM on the Packback team right now, you've probably worked with someone who's been trained and supported by Kelsey, if not Kelsey herself. So today's session is really going to be focusing on how to use the tools on Packback, how to discover some of the things that are a little bit less visible in Packback, and make sure that you have access to all of the tools and capabilities that our team can offer. And then really dig into the way that Paul and Jeffery are using Packback in their classrooms in some really unconventional and interesting ways. So Paul, would you mind starting with an introduction of what brought you to Packback, why you're using the platform, what goals you hope to achieve, and just a little bit about yourself as an instructor?
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me here today. I'm pleased to be part of the panel here to talk about Packback. I started using a discussion thread, a discussion board from our own internal learning management solution. I'll leave the name off for the purposes of today's conversation. But I was really disappointed in not only the level of interaction and frankly the level of conversations that was happening in that discussion board, but my inability to really engage with the students. I found that to be very frustrating, let alone the fact that it was almost impossible to know whether they were how to assess their work. And so I came into Packback. There's a joke about how I actually answered a phone call from one of your salespeople, but he said some really key words that struck me. And this has been true for the entire time I've been working with Packback, which is, you really focus on curiosity, and that happened to be one of my key values that I like to see in my own class. And so with that, I began using Packback. I'm actually relatively new to the academic world. I spent most of my career, 30 years, running my own IT consultancy. And so I've seen lots of software over the course of that time period. And I can see when software is well made and well supported, and I feel that Packback has both of those things. So that's I'm glad to be here today and honored to be part of the group.
Thank you, Paul. And Jeffery, would you mind introducing yourself as well? We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Hello, yes, I'm Dr. Jeffery Masters, assistant professor at University of Louisville. I teach a lot of different classes, from biology for non-majors to biology for majors, and anatomy and physiology and evolution and ecology, and really evolution is, and freshman biology are my two staple courses. But in either class, I use Packback for different reasons, and we'll get into it as we talk. But I wanted, especially for my non-majors class, it's a huge class, 350 students typically. And so how can I engage those students? How can I get to know those students, on an individual level? It's not, in smaller classes, you can directly engage them, but in this giant class, how am I going to get to know these students? And so this a platform like Packback not only gets me to get them to engage the content, ask questions about the content, but it lets me get to know my students. And so those were two important draws to Packback. And then just right off the bat, I had good support from the whole team, and so stepping through any problems and so again, that's what the main draws. Again, the level of engagement that I was able to get with those giant classes.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Jeffery. We're very happy to have you both here, and I'm excited to also introduce Kelsey. Kelsey's a former educator herself who joined our team, I think it's going on about 4 years ago now, which is wild to think about. But Kelsey, would you mind just introducing yourself from the perspective of how people might have worked with you and how you support instructors on the platform?
Absolutely. I may have a little delay, so I apologize. My Wi-Fi is struggling. But I'm Kelsey. I taught for a few years in the high school setting. I taught chemistry and physics, and joined the Packback team back when we were, in a small Chicago loft. I think I was like 20, time was the experience manager role. So your right hand woman or man that you have right now on the platform. Love about this role and what is so wonderful is making connections with educators, being able to support educators, make impactful changes in students' lives, and supporting them are all things Packback, but then also outside of Packback too. And it's just been such an amazing role. And about a year ago, transitioned to actually managing experience managers. So I still may reach out to you here and there. I'm seeing some familiar names in the chat now. So it's great to see familiar names. But yeah, in my capacity right now is making sure experience managers are staying up to date with really great product support knowledge, knowing that they know all the different processes in place to support instructors, making sure we're up to date with the most recent pedagogy, making sure experience managers have all the tools and resources they need to better support educators, thus better support students.
And thanks for joining us today, Kelsey. And I know I introduced myself at the beginning, but my name is Jessica Tenuta. I'm one of Packback's co-founders, and I lead our product division here at Packback. So my role today is just going to be posing the questions to our wonderful panelists and be available to answer questions towards the end. So we'll kick off today. I wanted to first also mention that if you are chatting in the attendee chat, we have two wonderful members of our team, Ariam and Ishani, who will be responding to messages there. If you have a question, they'll also pull your question out and drop it into the list of questions for us to address at the end of the session. So don't hesitate to use the chat or ask any questions there. We will definitely get to them throughout the course of the webinar. So the first place that we'll kick off today is I want to hand over to Kelsey to talk through the framework that our experience managers use when talking about how to bring everything together on Packback, both from the professor side and from the Packback side. So Kelsey, do you want to walk us through the Packback method that you recommend to your instructors?
Absolutely. So the Packback method at a high level is exactly how we recommend you implement Packback and structure it in your course. But then also throughout the term, utilize the automation of the software, the support of the Packback staff, so both your experience manager and our product support team, and then the actions you take within the platform and outside of the platform to continually give students really wonderful positive feedback and coaching if necessary. So at a very high level, we always recommend that Packback is at least 10% of the grade. As we know, I've had my fair share of days teaching, so I know that that grade percentage is currency for students, and especially in a setting where we're really looking for heightened engagement from students, consistent engagement over time, not that let me wait until the very last day of the term to do all my work. Having a nice grade requirement for Packback is going to be one of the best ways to get consistent synchronous engagement. And I think that's something we've figured out in this new online setting. And then what we want to do, there are different ways we can vary this, but at a high level, we want students asking their own questions every single week, because what that does is really leans into the strength of the platform. And we want them responding to their peers. So making sure that the discussion is incredibly student-led, giving them that autonomy in that teaching role, and letting you lean into a role as content coaching rather than content creator. Professors want to do something a little bit different. They want to stray from that ask one, answer two. That's why my team exists, to make sure that you have a wonderful cadence in action that will give you really great results and not stray too far from what our platform does really, really well. The last part of the Packback method is really the engagement that comes from your end, the educator end. And that is where you are encouraging students to engage in high quality behaviors, whatever that looks like for you, whatever is appropriate for your course. And you're doing so in a scalable and meaningful way. So what is not going to last long term is every instructor hopping on Packback every single day of the week for several hours a day. That is just draining and time consuming. We want to lean into the automation on Packback, and we want you to be the content expert on Packback. So for many instructors, what this looks like is spending about 15 minutes per week actually in the feed, interacting on the feed, and then dedicating another 15 minutes per week, maybe a little bit more, finding a way to bridge the gap between what's happening on the Packback platform and then what's happening in the rest of your course. So a great example of this is when we were all allowed to be in the same room with one another, is highlighting, the question of the week in your lecture. And, maybe it's as the professor of the course talking about what that real world experience is like, giving your expertise on that question, or it's opening it up for a class discussion. What I'd like to chat about really quickly are just a few things I've seen happen in the online setting that's been super fun, that has still allowed instructors to bridge the gap between the Packback platform and their course materials, even if the course is synchronous and has no lectures recorded or live. Some things I've seen instructors do is use the Zoom breakout room feature, give students a wonderful question of the week and have them discuss it, come back whole group and have a larger conversation. That's been something we also use internally just to kind of still feel like we're together, and have that nice team feel. And I think a lot of students and educators are looking for that same feel. Another thing I've seen work really well is professors create a short, maybe 1 to 2 minute video each week highlighting a question of the week or questions of the week. I know Soapbox is a popular product for that. Hopefully it's okay that I said Soapbox, share that link out with students, kind of a nice little spotlight. And then even if you can post an announcement on your learning management system with a question of the week. And it is just such a wonderful way for a student to feel special, especially in an environment where I think it's hard for students to feel seen right now. And we all need, I think, a little extra joy factor. And I think that's the best part of the Packback method, is fueling that purpose, fueling the curiosity, and having a little bit of that added joy factor when we all definitely very much need it. So yeah, Jessica, anything else you want me to add about our Packback method?
No, I think that was a perfect setup for the questions that we have for our panelists today. And Kelsey, throughout the presentation, I may ping you with a couple of other questions just to share your experience on what you've seen across the whole user base on Packback. But I think this was a perfect way to frame up our first set of questions, which is really around digging into how to set, digging into how to set clear expectations in the classroom. And before this webinar, I was able to chat with Paul and Jeffrey a little bit about how they've set up great expectations in their class so that students know what their goals are for using the platform and why this kind of questioning is important. And I believe that, Jeffrey, this is your quote from our last conversation. From here forward, all questions are yours. This is your community. So I think that's a great way to start the conversation here. We have 2 questions around this topic for you both. One, how do you set expectations in your class before students start posting on Packback? And then how do you continuously frame the work that students are doing on Packback when explaining the assignment and continuously reminding the students of the importance throughout the term? Jeffrey, would you mind kicking us off today with especially building on that question, that quote that you had on the first slide there, how you think about framing up the expectations?
Sure. And well, yeah, and I'll let them know that it's yours right off the bat. I mean, I will interact with them. They know I'm there. You're able to feature conversations, and you're able to, and questions and responses, and you're able to spark questions and responses. And of course, if there's a misconception or something really cool, you bring it to lecture. But again, it's theirs. I let them know that they answer each other's questions and work those out on their own. But leading into the class, was there a question? Okay. My video, are y'all getting me? I have an interruption on my end. Everything's good?
We're getting
Okay.
your audio. Everything's good.
Okay. Well, as long as you're getting my audio, then I'll talk a little bit again about those expectations and making those expectations clear to my students. First of all, there's the Packback, in addition to the Packback invitation that's sent out that clearly tells them how to sign up for things. A week ahead, I post my syllabus with an explanation, and I post an explanation on Blackboard, my LMS. And another thing that I found that's really helpful in introducing them to the platform beforehand is making a video of me actually doing it. There's a presenter mode on Packback, and you can go back and look at old communities and look at interactions and questions, and they can really see how it works. And so, they're not going into it blindly. And then I post and pin my first prompt question before class starts. And so if they want to, they can dive right in.
So you get in there and post your first question even before the students start registering for the class?
Yes, I exactly. Leading into sort of as this is how we're going to do things, and it's not required that first one, but it's an introductory question, and so it lets them know what's happening.
Yeah, that's very cool. It gives kind of a way to make sure that students have a place to go in and practice before the semester begins.
Exactly, without any points attached to it. It's sort of in their minds, it's low stress activity.
That actually brings up something that we've observed from students on the platform. I think one of the biggest things that instructors have to overcome when adopting a tool like Packback is students' discomfort with this type of more open-ended assignment. Maybe, Paul, as you think about this first question here on how to set expectations, how do you work through those nerves with students around not having such a concrete request and really having a lot more of the responsibility on the students to think about what they want to post?
No, that's a great question. By the way, Jeffrey, I thought your video using Packback and the presenter mode is a great idea. I'm going to steal that one and apply it to myself. But I try to start off with a very engaging question, and before we've ever met as a class, and like Jeffrey, I try to encourage them to log in and to start building community before we even meet in the classroom. Now, I'm in the business department, so that means we're always looking for some advantage. So I use extra credit points like extra cash. So I'm awarding extra credit points if somebody will log in, build their avatar, and register on the community prior to class starting, and so they get some benefits for doing that. But the first question I ask, and they soon learn that may be the last question I ask of the entire semester, which is, what are the three things that they have experienced that makes a class great? And I just get a lot of engagement right off the bat. Students are very welcoming. They like to tell me, they haven't experienced my class, so they basically say, this is what's happened in other classes. And a lot of people, there's a lot of feedback from each other, and they go just sort of go crazy with it. And that usually breaks the ice pretty quickly because it's something they can easily talk about, and they're getting a little bonus for doing it ahead of time. So that's the first part that I do. The other thing that I do, I put it in my syllabus, and I do have an additional PowerPoint that Packback has provided to me. But I make a point to them saying, learning is far more than just the 75 minutes we're going to have you in this class twice a week. So the whole point here is having Packback is to encourage a conversation outside of class, and to continue that conversation. And so that's along with, of course, as Kelsey indicated, the amount of points that we attribute for the semester keeps them engaged. So that's how I tend to set expectations and get the class rolling.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And Claudia Billings just put a question into the chat that I think is really relevant to this initial expectation setting. Claudia asked, how do you both think about telling your students or explaining to your students why there is a cost associated with Packback and how they're getting value back out of that cost? This is obviously a question that we think about a lot at Packback, because it's never just about, is a product valuable? It's about, how does that relate to the cost or the change that a student has to make to get that value out? So yeah, I'd be very interested in both of your thoughts. And maybe, Paul, do you want to start us off with your approach to that?
Yeah. Let me jump into that, because I like you, I'm sure we get these questions fairly frequently, and I start talking about the amount of materials and resources we need in order to conduct a class, right? students, they might complain about a textbook, but they really don't challenge the fact that whether we need one or not. In my class, and I use this particular product mostly for business ethics. The ethics book that I pick is relatively inexpensive. It's actually readily available. It's probably less than $20 on Amazon. But the point here isn't to spend as little as we can, is to spend the right amount. And frankly, we will spend more time in Packback. Our price for our students is in the $20 to $25 range. I think it's 25. And I tell you, the price per minute that they spend inside of Packback is much lower than it would be in any textbook that they do. So I see value in that as far as how frequently we use it and the amount of value that we get out of it.
Do you say that to your students at the beginning of class? I don't know how deeply you go into addressing the cost to them live.
I do. The shorthand is, hey, my textbook is really cheap. Just consider this as an extension of your textbook. But if there's a follow-up question like, isn't all software free? Then I get into that other explanation.
Gotcha. Thank you, Paul. How about you, Jeffrey? Has that come up a lot in your class? And
Actually, it does not. Again, with these giant classes with 350 students and at a time, over 1,000 students easy. I've used this product, maybe 2,000, but it doesn't come up very often. But that may be again the way that I frame it from the beginning, and using the same type of introduction. But I also don't require a textbook typically, and so this is just part of the materials. And so actually, this is less expensive than any of the other classes they have to. And again, for the time that they spend on it relative to a textbook or something, it seems worth it to them. And so it really hasn't come up a lot. And again, it might be because from the beginning, I explain how we're going to use it, and complete transparency about why we're going to use it, and again, don't require a textbook.
Think about how you frame up. One thing that we've noted is kind of challenging about talking about Packback is, unlike a textbook where the textbook provides information to the student, Packback is a frame that allows the students to produce their own content. How do you, in a simple way, explain to your students why they're getting value out of putting in that work and out of something that feels maybe more leveraged on their work on the platform than just kind of receiving content from a tool?
Let me jump in on that one if I could. I think, and we all need to take it from our own subject matter expertise. Mine is in business ethics. And so I make a big point of saying that ethics isn't something we can just read about. We have to experience it. We have to verbalize it in my classroom. We have to say it out loud. And when we're on a medium like the internet, we need to be able to write and make logical arguments that can be supported. And Packback fits into that perfectly. And so more often than, what we generally do is a lot of the conversations are about current events, much of what's happening in social justice right now, or the elections, or business operations. We bring back into the term of ethics, and the students really that takes very little effort on my part just to bring them back into ensuring that writing about ethics is as important as trying to receive a new theory that's coming at them.
Yeah, Jeffrey, in your class, how do you typically tell students about the value that they're going to get in the field that they're going into? Because I know you teach a range of introductory students for non-majors and students who are majoring in biology.
Yeah, and it changes depending on the class, of course. But either way, I set it up from the beginning as being part of the content. So my freshman non-majors biology class, it's issues and applications. That's the name of the course. And so in class, in lecture, I give the basic biology, the dry content. And then the issues and applications part is on Packback. For example, this just last week, I was giving my lecture on microevolution and speciation. And microevolution are these changes in a population that may or may not lead to speciation. But as part of the lecture, I also talked about subspecies and races, and I presented the evidence that humans races are not biological races; they're a cultural entity, and presented all this evidence for that, and then let that go on Packback, and it created some really interesting, relevant conversations to what's going on right now. I'm linking content to relevance for that class so that they see it as part of the content. And then in the upper level classes, what I have there is people that are already starting to be experts in their field, different disciplines, different levels of expertise. They have a lot to contribute. They're co-instructors. And so, they see it as part of the content to get this sort of the basics in class and then expand on that and go beyond that content in the Packback discussions. Understand it's part of the.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
We prayed to the Wi-Fi gods before this, but they are not smiling on us today. I just wanted to say at the end, just to kind of summarize some of the key tips that you both mentioned here. It sounds like you both think about how is what the student is learning in class relevant to their long-term career. So are they taking a class that is in major for them, or is it something that's supplementing their major? And then connect what they're doing on Packback to either something that's happening in the real world right now, or what's going to be helpful for them getting a job after graduation. So really thinking about what is the relationship between this student, this class, and Packback, and then articulating that value. And then Jeffrey shared an idea about recording a short video before the semester using the presenter mode on Packback to help walk students through how to use the platform and see a very full community, since they'll be coming into a fresh community in their class. And both of you addressing just proactively kind of the elephant in the room of this being a platform for cost, and what value should you as a student expect out of that cost. I think can always be very helpful. If we know that there's going to be a question, we definitely find that right in the expectation setting, so students have the right frame around what they can then expect out of Packback as a response for the value that they're investing in it. Did I miss any kind of summary tips there for this first section?
No, I think you got my points.
Yes, sounds good.
And of course, we always do recommend adding Packback to the syllabus. And if you have not used it, the platform will now create a downloadable template for adding Packback to the syllabus, which is obviously customizable, but at least gives a start towards that. It's always helpful to have it referenceable throughout the semester. So the next big topic that we wanted to cover today is how to use the tools on the platform scalably to increase engagement. So using those engagement tools around feedback, around pinning, around sorting, and some of the other platform features to spend a reasonable amount of time as an instructor and have an outsized impact on the class. So to get started on that, I know this is sort of a hypothetical, but I find it's a helpful framing question. If you both each had truly just 15 minutes to use the platform each week, and you had to prioritize the actions you wanted to take, what would be your game plan for using Packback? And maybe Jeffrey, do you want to kick us off? Because I know that you do a lot in those 15 minutes around bringing information back into the classroom.
Yes, and that's what's important to me about that. If I only had 15 minutes, I would just read as many posts as I can. And Packback sends emails each week for featured posts, and those are great. And or should I say suggestions for featured posts, and those are great. And I definitely read those. But if I only had 15 minutes, I would read as many as I can. And that's because the way that I use this platform in one way is to get an idea of what the weather in the class is. So you can get the climate of the learning environment from reading literature. What are the big changes happening in education? But what's the weather in my class? what's in their heads, what are their skill levels, their weak points, what do I need to cover, what are their interests. I get this idea of a class personality, and that really can affects my approach in the classroom. So what am I going to bring to lecture? What activities am I going to choose to share with them? What kind of examples am I going to use when I'm giving some sort of complex idea? Again, how do I make that content relevant? I've made that connection. I can read their Packback questions. I get an idea of this class personality, and I can adjust my teaching style and examples. Another thing that was kind of neat is that, sometimes someone in this giant class of 350 students will ask me for a letter of recommendation. And, I can look at grades before, but I can go to Packback and I can look at their questions, their responses, see their engagement, and see what kind of student they are. So making individual connections as well.
Jeffrey, you said two really interesting things in that answer. I think the notion of knowing what's happening in the macro education community can be learned from blogs and articles and the news, but each classroom is kind of its own little weather system. I love that metaphor, and thinking about how do you learn quickly what the climate is or what the weather is like in my class, and how is that changing over time. And then you mentioned something at the very end there that I've heard from a few instructors, and I think is one of the coolest use cases that I've heard for using Packback in a large class, which is really when you don't get that face time with a student, how could you write them a recommendation letter if you don't know them personally? And I've heard a few large class instructors like yourself share that the posts on Packback help you get to know the student better and can be able to inform a reference letter, which is something that we didn't design for or intend when we first built Packback, but has been just a really wonderful surprise to hear that that's something that's been helpful out of the platform. Do you sort the feed in any way when you're reading through the posts, or do you just dive in when you log in and kind of look at the recent comments that were made?
No, I try to read as many as I can. Of course, I will look at curiosity points if there's high curiosity points. Sometimes I'll sort them by curiosity points, because again, that's someone that's trying, is super engaged. Sometimes it's a competition to see who can get the highest curiosity points. And so sometimes if I'm strapped for time and if it's at 15 minutes, then I'll sort by curiosity points, and then read through those, and then feature some of those, or spark some of those so that other students will know they're there. But other than that, I just try to read as many as I can.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeffrey. And Paul, I know that you also jump into the feed every week or so and look at using kind of the 3 tools that we typically recommend. So you sort of follow the structure that our team member Ishani, who was Paul's previous experience manager, has formally or informally branded as the Ishani triple whammy of feature uses on the platform. So I'm sure she'll be happy that we've now formally branded it as such on the webinar here. But Paul, could you talk us through how you use those 15 minutes and how those tools work together to help you spend less time but have a bigger impact on your class?
Yeah. Well, and in fact, I think that the key phrase there is, I feel very much like I'm leveraging my time. There's a lot of things I do that take a lot of time and have a little impact, but there aren't nearly enough that take a little time and have a large impact. And Packback is certainly in that latter category. I have about 4 things that I do. If I just had 15 minutes, the first thing I do is I actually, like Jeffrey, is I scan what seems to be hot and what's happening. And that gives me a sense of how was my lecture last week? What did I do either via exercise, or maybe the reading that was assigned, or the discussion that was in the class? What bubbled up out of in Packback? And that gives me an indication of what to emphasize. Sometimes I'll bring that back into the classroom, but more often than not, I'm sort of just doing a dog ear here and saying, you know what, that was a really successful exercise. Here's how I'm going to use it again next semester, maybe with a slight tweak. The second thing I'm going to do is, after I've scanned them I'm typically taking the default sort, which is the most recent at the top. I'll go down and I'll look for those that have been particularly well, questions that I think are interesting. I will spark. So that's the first level. So they see if I'm sparking them. And I try to hand out a few sparks here and there. If it's a particularly good question and there are some responses, I will feature that. I'll hit a feature button, and I know that the student will be notified of that. And if I really think that this is the one I want people to focus on, my due dates typically are Sunday, and so I will go in on Wednesday or Thursday, and I'll see a really hot question that I'd like to see other people get around. I will pin that, and then because it's top of mind, as soon as they log in, that student tends to get a whole bunch of persons, boys, girls, because she's going to be have a lot of responses, and that's a positive. The third thing that I'll do is if I have additional time, and those two things don't take very long, and I can really do this in about 15 minutes, is I'll provide some coaching, and mostly I'm looking for opportunities to highlight a particularly good answer or question, because I know that it stays on the post, and so other students see it, and I know that the individual student gets an email with that. And I mean, who wouldn't like an email from the professor saying, "Wow, I really like this post," and all that sort of thing. I'm going to take some latitude here. I spend more than 15 minutes out there because I enjoy it. So, that might be my first 15 minutes of the week, but somewhere around Thursday night or Friday night when I'm bored at 11 o'clock at night, I'll go in there, and sometimes I'll just engage and do responses myself. I rarely, if ever, ask a question because I don't want to draw attention to a question that I ask, but I will definitely engage with students, particularly if it's a hot ethical issue. And I will oftentimes take the counter argument just so that somebody can see that there's a different view out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. And Sherry asked a question in the chat that I think is helpful to bring up here and just provide a quick summary of the different tools that Jeffrey and Paul just mentioned. The first is a spark on our platform is kind of like a like on another social media platform. It means this sparked my curiosity. And the interaction for an instructor is exactly the same as for a student. So when a student gives a spark, their peer gets notified. They see a notification in their top navigation bar, and they can see who gave them the spark. And so it's just kind of a way to provide a quick pat on the back to a peer. But when an instructor uses that same flow, it also shows students that their instructors are reading their posts. And those small interactions that take half a second, we found to be very meaningful for students. There's definitely a tight correlation between overall platform health around how high quality are the posts and how much students are engaging with those very light touch interactions with instructors, just so that they know that their instructor is present and looking at the feed. The next feature that Paul mentioned was featuring, which is being able to select a question and say, this is a post I would like to highlight. That post then gets moved to a tab called featured posts in the community. So it's sort of a highlight reel of the best posts in the community, as well as sent to the students in a weekly digest email. So it's a great way to pull the students back into the discussion. It's also kind of a soft reminder for the students to post because they get that digest, they see what their peers are posting. And it's a great way, if you strategically feature specific posts around topics that you want to highlight, to also gently direct the discussion without it feeling like the instructor is driving the discussion. So it can be a gentle nudge around the topics you'd like them to focus on. And the final feature that was mentioned is giving feedback on the platform. And for folks who are new to the platform, there are two kinds of feedback an instructor can give on Packback through this tool: praise or coaching. Praise feedback is actually public to the whole community. So we definitely recommend that that instructors who are leaving praise do so on can be a guide for the whole class and not just for the individual student that sees that praise. So it can show the class looking at that post, what did my instructor like about this and what should I be modeling? Coaching feedback is private. Mm-hmm.
I need to correct myself. I said I was doing coaching when I was doing praising. I know the coaching goes directly to the student and not to everybody else. But normally what I do is I spend some time praising some students. So thank you for the reminder of what I actually do.
No problem at all. They're through the same interface, but you get to just choose if you'd like it to be private or public. In both cases, the student who receives it gets a notification, and they can see the praise or coaching that their instructor gave. But praise is the only one that is public to the class. So if you were limited on time, or if you're working with a very large class, that praise feedback can be extraordinarily helpful to guiding the community, because you can feature a few posts, make them very visible to the class, leave praise feedback on those posts, and then your whole classroom can benefit from you leaving praise on just a few students' posts. So sort of the social learning theory, Albert Bandura, right? Being able to learn from what students are receiving in the class, even if it's not being given to the individual students. So we found that to be very helpful in large classes, like the one that Jeffrey teaches. I'm going to pause here just for a second. Are there any other questions around the tools that either of our panelists mentioned here, or any tools that you've interacted with on the platform that you would just like more clarification on? This is a great time to dig into those as well. And if you think of any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll come back and visit. And I saw Sherry just asked a question about the filters. That's a great question. We have two ways to kind of filter the main feed. One is through the sorting feature that allows you to smart sort the feed based on a few algorithms looking at some very straightforward things, like which posts have the most curiosity points overall, which posts have the most activity overall. But then also some more sophisticated algorithms that look at how recent is a post combined with how high quality it is, combined with how active it is. And that's what we call our sort by hot. So it keeps fresh, good quality posts at the top of the feed. You can also sort by undiscovered, which means that you take those hot posts and then exclude any posts that have already received a response. So that's really helpful about in classes where students may have posted a really good question and then not yet received a response. So if you'd like to make sure that those kinds of questions get interacted with, featuring those questions can be really helpful, because by featuring, it'll make sure that students see that post and interact with it. And Jeremy, I saw you asked a great question here around, do our panelists worry about featuring the same questions from the same students over and over? Or do you have a strategy for how you distribute that praise or that featuring interaction across the class? And maybe, Jeremy, do you want to share your thoughts on how you think about that?
Were you asking me? Yes, sure. Sometimes that happens. As I mentioned before, sometimes it becomes a competition with the curiosity points. And people that write good questions. And so I sometimes see the same student again come up in the suggested feature. But I will sometimes do it twice, but I just kind of try to spread it around. I purposely absolutely spread sparks and features around.
I'll jump in here, and I probably don't pay attention to it at all. I'm working strictly off the content, and I have Jeffrey has so many students, I don't know how he keeps track of them all. I could keep track of all mine, but if somebody deserves 3 or 4 sparks over the course of the semester, I don't have a problem with that.
Jeremy, I think you're getting at something really interesting, though, that if you're looking at students who might be engaging less often or less consistently, or might be struggling in the class overall, you can search for individual students in Packback and find their profile and see how they've posted, and use that to kind of inform any next steps you might want to take with that student. But more systematically, you could also sort the feed by activity or by curiosity score, and look at the students who might be towards the bottom end of that sorted list and interact with them or give them some coaching feedback. So sort of using the filters in reverse, you can find those students who might be struggling and intervene or highlight a great post from one of those students that might be unique out of their whole body of work, which will go a long way in providing a nudge to show them that you're seeing them. So the features can all kind of be used in reverse to help to support those students who might not be showing up in the recommended featured post each week.
Yeah, Jessica, actually, I did that this morning. I took I generated a report, and I looked at the people who had the lowest scores. I'm only 2 weeks into my required weeks of Packback, and I actually emailed the 4 or 5 students concerned that maybe they hadn't fully engaged in the community yet, because everybody else, I've only got 40 in this community right now, but they got actually a quick direct email from me just asking them if they were having struggles or wanted to know, let them know that I'm paying attention, I guess.
Yes, yes, that's something I do as well. I use that filter, in reverse. Who's not participating, who's not being engaged, and it makes a difference. When you send an email or feature a post, they notice. It makes a difference.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear that report used that way was helpful for those students. In the email that we send out each week to instructors, just with insights about the community, one of the metrics that we include in there are students who are growing quickly. So not necessarily students at the top of the leaderboard, but students who are learning and changing over the course of the semester. That came out of some insights that we had from interviews over the past couple of years of instructors, especially in large classes, feeling like it's hard to tell when their class is making a difference on the students. So we wanted to make sure that information was very visible, like who's actually benefiting and changing over the course of the term. But thank you both for both of your tips on the tools that you're using. We'll move to the next section just for time's sake around how to bring Packback more fully into the class. How do you make this a holistic experience focused on curiosity and student discussion? So with that, we have 2 questions here, and feel free to respond to either or both. How do you bring Packback posts into the classroom? And how do you use them outside of the classroom as well? And then do you use any consistent reinforcement to model exemplary posts and to help drive student outcomes? So things like bringing a post up in class and then more from a meta level, digesting what you like about the post and how students can model it. Jeffrey, do you want to kick us off with this one? I know you do some cool things to drive the overall lecture changes as a result of what you're seeing in the discussion.
Sure, and this is like my other classes, it depends on which class. In that non-majors class, a lot of times I'll read, the questions and the responses, and sometimes the students will focus on, misconceptions, almost like, hey, let's fix this. But if they don't, that's something that I can bring to class. Something that's not picked up on lecture, then I'll repeat it or go back over it. Or if there's just some really cool conversations, again, in issues and applications, if there's something that I hadn't thought of before, which happens a lot, I bring that into the conversation in class. And again, on 409, again, it's an idea of their skill. How deep can I go into the lecture? Do I need to do any reviews? I ask questions where they're having to access previous knowledge. One of the favorite questions I have for a prompt question is, what myths or misconceptions have you heard about this topic, evolution? So they're accessing, I'm finding out what do they know, what do they think they know, and also trying to get them to engage in a little bit of metacognition as well. But that information helps me direct the classroom, the activities, how deep I need to go into a particular subject. And again, it's also giving me an idea of that class personality, and can help direct discussions. And overall, that leads to confidence and comfort so that they are talking to me. So that reinforcement, bringing it back into the classroom, they get comfortable with each other, they get comfortable with me, and they're going to ask questions about the content. And then the writing coaching of, again, as especially in my upper level classes, I've noticed a difference in the way not only that they ask questions in class, but the way they write their answers on the open response questions. They get in the habit of writing the responses in this particular format. And especially in science, you want to do things like include citations and use reputable sources and make sure all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And so, again, that's what I use the main. That's my what I see as the biggest usefulness for me as a teacher in Packback is being able to take that and bring it back into the classroom.
And thank you, Jeffrey. And Paul, I know that you do some cool stuff with recommended articles in the class that the students discuss too. Would you mind letting us know how you bring Packback into the holistic class experience? And also, we just got a really interesting question from Monty in the chat too, which we'll address right after this one too.
Yeah, and I want to keep my answers short so that you have time to get some feedback from the attendees. In short order, I strongly encourage referencing materials that are actively used by business people. So that I give maybe some kudos. I don't really give extra points, but strongly recommend they use the Wall Street Journal or Forbes or some other business articles, business publications as a reference sources. But as far as bringing student posts back into the classroom, one semester, and I found this to be pretty helpful, I would sort by the most active over the last week, and then I would notify that student if there's usually one or two that are competing. I wouldn't take a raw number, but maybe they had 6 or 5, or maybe somebody even had 4, but it was a really good question and some good responses. I would ask them to be prepared to come up to class, talk about it, and then talk about the responses that they got and how did they feel when they saw those answers coming back at them. And of course, oftentimes those responses are in the classroom, and so we might spawn a discussion right there. But let me wrap up there and pass it back to you, Jessica, so you can handle the questions that are coming in.
Yeah, well, thank you. And the question that Monty asked, I would just love to hear kind of how you both think about this, because as this question describes, posts on Packback are graded for their structure and for their conventions and for how students dig into the writing and cite sources, but they're not graded for whether or not the post is on topic with the topic of lecture for that week. How do you both think about that phenomenon on Packback and reconcile that in the way that you think about this tool in context of your class?
Well, that is when I use the coaching tool. So that they have to have given at least some nod to the fact that we're talking about ethics. So if we're talking about something that has little or absolutely no relationship to ethics, then they'll get a coaching tip from me saying this isn't what we talk about over here. It might be a reasonable. It has happened so infrequently that I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I've had to send coaching tips for that. But that's how I handle it.
Yeah, the same for me. It's happened again, less than 5 times in the more than 1,000 students that I've had, and so again, it's easy to handle right then and there with either a quick email. Sometimes I'll send a personal email as well. It's happened so few times. They were engaged. Oh, go ahead.
One thing I think that was clear in both of your answers throughout the session today too was really around how do you shine your instructor's spotlight on the things you want students to model, and then maybe not shine your instructor's spotlight for the whole class on those posts that are a little bit off topic too. So really, how do you make the ones that you want the students to mirror as visible as possible, and then in more private ways help to redirect the students who might be going a little bit too far off track. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like those are sort of the themes of how you've addressed the tools that you have at your disposal.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in on there for a second. That is so much easier to do in Packback than in the other tool that I was using. That may be part of because we are able to shine the light on the positive. I think the students pick that up very, very quickly. They're pretty bright kids out there. They understand, what side their bread's buttered on, as we say.
And in our last couple of minutes here, also just open up in the chat, and I went the wrong way on my slides there. Just open up in the chat as we have an opportunity here with a lot of current, long-term, and brand new Packback instructors to be able to share tips with each other. And this is not so structured here, but I want to pose these questions to folks in the chat. What tips and tools have you found to be most helpful when you're using Packback? Maybe even things that we haven't recommended, but you found to be really helpful in your classroom. And are there any usage tips that you'd want other educators who are on this webinar to hear? Because everyone on the chat can see those comments. So it's a great time just more as a community. And I know we can't all hear each other, but a great time as a community to share ideas and tips with one another. So we'll hang here on this slide until our time at 1 o'clock. And while folks are responding in the chat, I noticed that there was another great question from Jeremy that came up that maybe our panelists can address here while folks are responding. Jeremy asked, a big frequent issue that he sees is when students write questions with wording that's unique, but ideas are largely the same as previous questions. How do you address those kind of duplicate or repetitive concepts being addressed by students in the classroom? And I saw Kelsey popped on video, so maybe you have an idea around how to address this.
Yeah. This is actually one of those things that's kind of exciting, like an exciting problem to run into, because you're noticing that there's something that clearly students are that's piquing their interest or they're gravitating towards. So like my first thing is note whatever they're talking about, because that's clearly the topic that students are interested in, right? You get a little peek inside of their brain. And then this is a great example of how we can do a whole class redirect. So I notice we're being yes men right now, yes people. That's fine. Why don't we go ahead and lean into supporting points? So you can redirect to a different tool on the platform. So almost it's a challenge. Next time you post and you agree with a peer, use a supporting point and then bring in a new perspective. Maybe it's a new outside source, a new piece of information. So you're adding on value to the learning experience. Or maybe it's pivoting and saying, hey, we're agreeing with each other too much. And the next time you meet with your students, or maybe it's an email, you challenge them to come up with a different perspective, one that is not maybe natural to them, or one their gut's not originally going to. So a few different options there, but my number one gut feeling is to redirect them to use the supporting points tool, which still counts as a response, and encourage them to bring in new cited sources and new information.
Thank you, Kelsey. Any thoughts on this question from panelists?
I can comment, but I don't know if Jeffrey was. We're sort of frozen there for a minute. Let's see here. I took up Kelsey's second point, which is I try to encourage them to come up with unique questions when I talk about it in class. I don't penalize them if it doesn't, but they know for the most part they're trying to do something different and unique. The one thing that I will some say is if you find yourself repeating everybody else's question, why don't you get in there first and then you ask the question and then you force everybody else to write a different question from that point.
Yeah, I make general comment in class rather than in situations like that, especially when I have a giant class. It may be that just random chance, and with that many students, they just happen to ask the same question. And so I just sort of like say, watch out for, give a plagiarism talk, and then let it go.
And Katie Clemens just chimed in the chat as well with, I think, a great point that when the students are interacting with Packback, they're seeing the most recent posts from their peers, but may not be digging back into several weeks or several pages back to see those duplicates that the instructor might see. David also noted a great question around if Bloom's taxonomy is being used to classify questions. I can speak from Packback's perspective on this briefly, that Bloom's taxonomy was actually one of the main frameworks that we use to inform our question classifier that is used to auto-flag student questions. So we simplified the framework into higher and lower levels of Bloom. So really any question with keywords or structure that correlates to the remembering and understanding level, those are the kind of posts that will be flagged for this question may be close-ended reason. And students who receive that as a reason for moderation get feedback on how to edit to open up their question to a higher level of Blooms. But I'm interested to see, how does that factor into how you both think about feedback? Any quick comments before we wrap up today, and how you think about Bloom's taxonomy relating to choosing questions to feature? Maybe Jeffrey, if you want to chime in with your thoughts.
I do it. It's subconsciously. I think those are feature. I don't do it consciously, but yes, I typically, the ones that I feature Spark tend to be the ones that are the higher levels. Now that I think about it, but that may be because I'm following Packback. They do a good job picking those out.
Well, as we're coming up to the hour here, John Locke. Hey, John, it's great to see you in the chat. just posted a great note around what he does to use Packback to help encourage engagement. And as we're wrapping up the session here, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's really an honor to get to work with you all and be able to share tips and tricks like this from instructors across the country who are using Packback in different ways. If we can be helpful in any way, I'm available by email for ideas on how to use the product or for feedback on how it could work better for you. Kelsey is also available and always excited to give guidance in addition to your assigned experience manager, who will be a great resource throughout the course of the term. But thank you everyone for joining us today. After this session ends, if you're still on the session, you'll be redirected to Packback's YouTube, which has some additional videos around how to use each feature, around tips and tricks, and around how to spend a short amount of time each week to get the most value. So with that, thank you all so much for joining us today. It was really an honor to get to have our two presenters, Paul and Jeremy, with us today. Very, very grateful to you both for sharing your time with us, and I know is a very busy semester.
Okay, you're welcome.
You're very welcome. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone.